So as you all know, I was on Jubilee.
And you did pretty terribly. Maybe he doesn't think so, but most of his points fell flat.
So yeah, I commented, "Thank you for having me on Jubilee. Although I am disappointed to see the majority of my moments cut out and put behind a paywall, I still am grateful for the opportunity. Thanks again for putting this together." All the parts where like I actually debate or say anything, they're all cut out.
I wanted to watch the full thing for myself. I hope this demonstrates how much I love you guys. I had to pay to watch 2 hours of Hunter Avalon. The grueling task of watching 2 hours of Hunter Avalon and knowing that I paid for it was beyond torture.
You mentioned that conservatives don't get offended by speech as much, but conservatives get offended by pronouns. They got offended by Mr. Potato Head. They get offended by all kinds.
Really stupid things.
Yeah, they get very triggered also.
Yeah.
The other guest on the panel is about to refute this nonsense point, but I will too. You only gave 2 examples, and they're both to do with gender pronouns. And it's actually completely counter to his point, because it's actually an example of the left being triggered. We on the right just don't want to be forced to use your pronouns. We want to be able to say whatever we want. But that's not good enough, as we've seen. As in many situations, I have to use your pronouns. And that's what conservatives are angry about.
Disagreements.
I would like to push back a little bit about conservatives being offended by pronouns. I think it's more so that they are being forced and to acquiesce to the pronouns of other people, which is, a form of, controlling speech.
Damn, just destroyed Hunter's point. That's completely it. I'm not offended by you calling yourself whatever you want. I just don't want to be forced to have to do it. And while I'm not offended by you calling yourself whatever you want, you would be offended by me calling you a specific pronoun. So yeah, it is a case of the left being triggered, not the right.
Well, don't conservatives get really mad when the whole pronouns and bio thing, where people would just be tweeting and it had nothing to do with pronouns? And they're like, oh, look, you have pronouns.
I don't think in most of those cases, conservatives are actually offended by your pronouns in your bio. They're usually just making fun of you. I couldn't help but notice that Hunter doesn't have his pronouns listed. I bet he'd add them if he got enough pushback from the triggered left.
You have a right to not use someone's pronouns. If you're walking down the street, you don't have to use their pronouns. You have the First Amendment. But when you're in a private institution or in a school or in a college or something like that, they can have rules, and there's already compelled speech. For example, you would never go to church with your grandma and then say the F word in church because you're in church, and that would be inappropriate. And we have a form of compelled speech.
It's not required to keep your job. Yeah.
Oh my god. They just immediately destroy his points. Cursing in front of my grandmother at church is the same as losing my livelihood for saying something. Restrictions on cursing aren't ideologically driven. But you're right, private institutions often don't let people say things that are deemed offensive. And who are the ones being offended when it comes to gender pronouns? Oh, that's right, the left. You just disproved your own point.
Pronouns now for the rest of the time are pretty princess.
That's not a pronoun. Those are not even pronouns.
Okay, so what are your they, them, zer, he, she?
Wait, no, that's not even what I'm talking about. But when people have she, her, he, him, everybody has a collection of pronouns.
Yeah, and I thought everybody could choose whatever pronouns they wanted. So why isn't that a pronoun? Uh-oh, the white male is mansplaining what can and can't be pronouns. What a bigot. What you just said is nonsense. They aren't pronouns. But Z, Zer, and Zim are, and the other 10,000 that random people on Tumblr just invented are also not nonsense.
You need to change their language to whatever you're feeling that day, especially for people who say that their pronouns change or they're gender fluid.
I agree.
Today.
I think that's a little silly, but we also respect people's identity.
Right,
so.
But
Wait, what? Yeah, I agree that it's a bit stupid, but you just have to do it because you have to respect people. You don't want to offend them, which is the whole point that you're arguing against. Just for context, this part of the segment is under the prompt, "The other side is factually wrong."
Well, I will say that, I'm on the left now, and I agree that a lot of people on the left do argue without a lot of logic and reason. That's definitely true.
Completely true. Take, for example, you, now that you've become a left-winger.
But What helped me when I went from being conservative to left-wing was starting to understand these concepts better, because for a long time, like what you said about the trans issues, I thought that was factually wrong too. You're right, it's like biology, what are you talking about? Like how does that make sense? But then when I understood like the separation between sex and gender, and how there is the socially constructed form of gender, which is a collection of behaviors and expressions that we all culturally recognize and we kind of apply to people based on their genitals, does not actually mean that sex and gender are the same. It's rather a separate concept that is correlated.
Yeah, except a social construct is not a fact. So yeah, conservatives are not factually wrong. You're referring to a concept, something that's subjective, while we're referring to facts.
If they're biologically male, you're right, they're not female. You're correct. But they don't say they're female. They say they're a woman, which is a gender category, and it's separate from the biology category.
He doesn't seem to understand that these aren't facts. Me saying, oh no, I'm a Zimzer, isn't a fact.
And I disagree. They do say they are female now. That I'm blanking on the name, but there's the trans woman, biological male, who has been competing in cycling, who's done interviews on one of the late night shows. They're all the same.
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some.
But he says.
So again, you've disproved your point. Your example actually goes against your argument. Again. A conservative arguing against a social construct is not arguing against facts. They're arguing against an idea. But as you've just agreed, there are some people on the left who do argue against facts.
Or to, linguistics. Like it used to be a categorization for, I think, verbs or proverbs, and now it's morphed into gender theory, which is
gender.
There's a history of the word gender, and now it's totally different from what it was, like maybe like 100 or something years ago.
But who cares?
Sorry, I was gonna edit that laugh out, but I had to keep it in there. So, this concept of gender has changed over time, and it could change again if we wanted to, because it's not a fact, unlike biological sex, which hasn't changed over time.
But if your theory doesn't have the backbone to last, if you look 200 years in its history, then I'd say that there's something.
It's not feminist theory.
What? Did he just say it wasn't feminist theory? That's not what this guy said. He said gender theory. I think Hunter's getting frustrated because he's doing so badly.
It's just the concept of gender and understanding.
So it's just a concept, so it's not real?
Wait, gender exists as a result of human interaction because it is a social construct.
He's just saying a load of nonsense to obfuscate how badly he's doing. But she actually hit the nail on the head. He said it was a concept. Therefore, it's just an idea. It's not a fact.
But yeah, Democrats do tend to be more compassionate at the end of the day, just truthfully, because of what you said. They tend to have more feelings in general.
Yeah, they're more emotional, maybe. But I wouldn't say they're more compassionate, necessarily. Because studies have shown that conservatives are more likely than liberals to give money to charity, even on lower incomes. They're also more likely to do voluntary work and to give blood. There's a general perception that liberals tend to be more compassionate, but I don't think it's borne out by the data. I think despite their sanctimonious rhetoric, their actions speak louder than their words.
You don't need God for morality, first and foremost, because that actually makes things more difficult. Now I have to convince the guy who thinks it's fun to kill people that actually it's bad to kill people because God says so, and then I have to convince him about God, and then I have to convince him that my God is right, and then I have to go through all this. Instead, what I can do is say, evolutionarily, we have evolved to be social creatures. If we have humans that are just murdering for fun, senselessly, society will collapse unless that behavior is done away with or heavily looked down on.
There you go. There will never be another psychopathic serial killer, because we just have to send our chief negotiator, Hunter Avallone, to tell him that society will collapse if he doesn't stop being a murderous psychopath. You know, a lot of psychopaths who want to kill people probably don't care if society collapses.
This comes from a collective interest in benefiting all of society. We don't need religion.
So you're just saying you shouldn't do it because it's unpractical.
Right.
No, I'm doing it because I care about me, myself, and I don't want to live in a world where I get murdered. I don't want to live in a world where my daughter is at risk of getting murdered.
You want the serial killer to...
So it turns out the only reason Hunter isn't killing people is for his own self-interest. So if I gave Hunter €50 and told him to kill somebody and assured him that nobody would ever find out and there'd be no societal consequences for his action, he'd probably do it because it would be in his self-interest. There's a very interesting conversation to be had here, but Hunter's just making a complete balls of it. I'm not religious myself, but at the end of the day, I think Hunter's wrong. Religion makes morality simple. If we all draw our morality from the same source, then there's no room for disagreement. Killing is bad. Why? Because God said so. It says it in the Bible. Look. As Carl Trueman puts it so eloquently in his book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, when sacred order collapses, morality is simply a matter of taste, not truth. If someone thinks killing people is fun, you're going to have a hard time convincing them otherwise.
Realize that you don't want to get murdered, so he shouldn't murder people.
No, that's why we collectively as humans will say that serial killer is wrong. The serial killer might not think it's wrong, and if he has no sense of knowing it's wrong, then he's a psychopath. We lock him up. He's done harm now.
Wait, what? You lock up the serial killer? Wasn't your argument 3 seconds ago that you think you can convince the serial killer that killing is wrong?
Now I have to convince the guy who thinks it's fun to kill people.
That was some of the fastest backtracking I've seen in a long time.
Brought up immigration a second ago. The wall is not the answer because the goal is not to just block everybody.
No, the goal of the wall is not to block everybody. The goal of the wall is to block everybody who is entering illegally.
Yeah,
Maybe instead of a wall, since people are just burying or digging under it, we have a bunch of Border Patrol agents there to make sure that if you cross the border illegally, they apprehend you, like what we already have right now.
I had to make sure this video wasn't uploaded about 4 years ago, because Hunter seems completely oblivious to the border crisis that is happening under the current system of the Biden administration. But I guess like all left-wingers, he can just pretend that the crisis isn't happening, and then it goes away, like magic.
We also have one of the #1 most strict immigration processes for people to go through as well.
It's not working. We need it.
I was like, millions have flooded the border.
The policy might be strict, but right now it's like...
Including the
But the
top
problem right
terrorist
now is
watch
because
list.
it's so strict, it's almost incentivizing illegal immigration, which is actually something I talked about even when I was conservative, is that...
Again, more reality denial. And I'm glad he got slightly called out, at least this time. This is unambiguously a lie. Immigrants are flooding the border in the millions because they know how lax the US policy on immigration has become under the Biden administration. You can listen to interviews of immigrants who will tell you directly that Biden's rhetoric is the reason they felt comfortable trying to cross the border.
We can, obviously those are policies that we would have to talk about how to change them. I don't have all the answers.
Or any of them, I would argue.
But the reason they have to wait 20 years is because we have so many illegal immigrants coming in that the ones going the legal route have to wait and are pushed back even further.
Right,
How do,
right now,
how do the illegal
process-
immigrants in the country affect the process of people applying to become legal? How does that affect
Because
them?
their spot's taken.
Hunter literally knows nothing.
Test is important, sure, but that does not determine assimilation. If you look at it, immigrants and illegal immigrants assimilate to the majority. This is what happens when minorities enter countries where they are the minority. They tend to assimilate to align more so with the majority. This has been tracked in America with illegal immigrants. It's been tracked in other Western countries as well.
Yeah, I would like some citations on a lot of the stuff Hunter is saying, because it seems like he's just talking out of his ass at this point. For example, let's look at this Gallup poll of Muslims across Europe. A total of 0% said homosexuality was morally acceptable. 0%. That's some good assimilation. There were more clips, maybe worth talking about, but honestly I'm tired of listening to Hunter, so I'll probably call it quits. Thanks.